So we're going to be diving into this. I've kept the nature of this talk very similar to what we would usually do. In fact, what I've done is I've skipped forward in all my notes and stuff to the resurrection. Whereas next week we'll be back into, I think it's chapter 4 of Matthew. So it's been a bit of an odd one, though, because you know, to actually do this as a study and start to sort of pick this apart, I've done it before, but it's a weird one because it's such, in many ways, the resurrection is such a personal thing. And the gospel is such a personal thing, you know, but actually there's this whole corporate element to it. And to study it and to dissect it and to pull it apart, it's this really huge thing and huge responsibility. But I'm hoping that this morning you'll discover a few new things maybe, or some focuses or some lenses or whatever to pick on. But anyway, as I've already said, the greatest event in all of human history is the resurrection of Jesus. There is no doubt about it whatsoever. And there are loads of great debates that take place in the nature of Christology, which is the fancy term for the study of Jesus, the theology of Christ. And if you were to think about Jesus' life in the realm of incarnation, crucifixion, and resurrection, those three things, they're the three things that sort of people tend to hitch their wagons onto in a theological term, in respect of which lens to look through. So, what do you think incarnation means? What's incarnation? Anybody? Yeah, well, where it was incarnation, not reincarnation. So incarnation is the birth of Jesus. It's where he becomes man. Jesus becoming flesh. God becoming man. Crucifixion. It's obvious, isn't it? It's his death. And resurrection. What's his resurrection? Where he rose again, his new life, absolutely. And some of my favorite modern theologians have some great thoughts surrounding which one of these might be the most significant event. And you know, I can sort of hear you groaning inwardly already, going like, "Oh, what do you mean?" And you kind of think, "Oh, aren't they all equal and all significant?" And yes, they are. Absolutely, you know, like you don't get one without the other in reality. And yet our theology is shaped by which of these we choose to view the rest through. You know, like, I mean, honestly, it is. It so is. So, of course, they're all equal, and yet, practically speaking, we decide, we pick which one we kind of view them through. We all pick theologically which one of them we give preeminence to, which one we focus on more. And to think of it this way, we decide whatever we view our lives, our relationship, our salvation through, which our role in the kingdom. It's all shaped through which lens we view the life of Jesus, whether it's the incarnation, whether it's the crucifixion, whether it's the resurrection. And these become the kind of lens that we put everything else through. And much of evangelical Christianity clings to the idea of substitutionary atonement. And you know, and in short, this idea is that Jesus died our death, took our punishment, and we'll dive into this a bit more later, not necessarily later today, but later in the series. And you know, I am not going to suspend or argue against substitutionary atonement the slightest little bit. I think it is a really important thing for us to understand. But there is other ways of looking at what happened on the cross. But the thing is, with looking at the cross through the lens of substitutionary atonement, is that there is very obvious conclusions. about which one of these three lenses, the incarnation, the crucifixion, and the resurrection, is the most important. Which one do you think it is? If we think it's that, which one? Incarnation, crucifixion, or resurrection? Which is the most, if you're thinking it's all about... Well, it's if you're thinking substitutionary atonement, it's got to be the cross. It's got to be his crucifixion as a place where he's killed, and obviously it raises really important Christological questions about the life of Jesus, let alone the resurrection. It raises these things for us, like. And I remember the story, or the film rather, of the Passion of the Christ. The only 18 film that any good preacher will sort of say, go watch. And it starts, and watch it only once because it's pretty gruesome. And it's all subtitled because it's all in Greek and Latin and what have you. And it's produced by Mel Gibson. If you don't know Mel Gibson, he's an actor, but he's a very, very, very conservative Catholic, really quite conservative Catholic. And right at the very start, the opening line that comes up on the screen, it says this. It says, "Dying was his reason for living." Dying was his reason for living. And it almost makes it seem like everything else was just a filter. Was the resurrection a neat magic trick at the end to be just like, ta-da! Look, I'm alive. I really am God. And if dying was his reason for living, it gives us a particular lens about how we view Jesus. And personally, I like to spin it around, and I like to say that living was his reason for dying. And Jesus was way more interested in life before death. Way more interested in life before death. And that's why he went to the cross. There's a modern theologian called Greg Boyd, who's one of my favorite thinkers. Don't agree with everything that he says. I find him quite challenging at times, but he's definitely a really, really good thinker, and he's challenged a lot of my preconceived ideas and loves to argue for the preeminence and centrality of the crucifixion, not because of substitutionary atonement, but just for other ideas. And he would say, actually, the cross is really, really, really central. And his idea is that God, his plan, and his nature is revealed perfectly through his work on the cross. Everything we see in the world of theology should be seen through the lens of the crucifixion. That's what Greg Boyd teaches. Another one of my favorite thinkers, again, because he challenges a lot of, I don't agree with everything that he says and he writes and stuff. But there's a guy called Tony Jones. And he's messed with a lot of my thinking and stuff, and really challenged where I come from. And he comes from the school that I would call solidarity Christology, and he loves to raise points about the preeminence of the incarnation. He teaches that actually the way to view Jesus is not through the cross, it's not through his resurrection, it's actually through the incarnation. The fact that God came to be man, that he came here, and he came to join in the struggle, and that the cross being the ultimate end of that work of solidarity. It's the idea that God joined us that drives his theology and his understanding, and it's a really interesting way to view what happened on the cross, and then what happens in the resurrection. However, I believe in the preeminence of a resurrection. I think we are people of the resurrection, and since the very beginning of the story, we've said that this story is about what do we call this story? All the way back in Torah, when we started looking at this, like years ago. I mean, it nearly is years. We can nearly pluralize it. We titled it, didn't we? We said it's a narrative, and this narrative is titled what? What did we say it was? Anybody remember? If you need a hint, it's on your sheets. It's a tale of two kingdoms. A tale of two kingdoms. And we have to go all the way back to the beginning to get this trivia. So we've had one. So one of the kingdoms was peace, or shalom. Does anybody remember what the other kingdom was that we talked about? Empire, absolutely. Empire and shalom. And we have experienced the struggle between these two kingdoms, between truth and falsehood, between the two orders, the order of death and the order of life. And we know these orders well. The order of death, things like cancer, greed, adultery, selfishness, disease, disasters, corruption, fear, and those things. Those are the things of empire. And then there's the order of life, and we know that order well as well. That's love, mercy, forgiveness, hope, joy, healing, redemption, second chances, and all those things. And it's the equivalent of light and darkness. And since the very beginning, we found ourselves in the tension between which order is most true. Like we said from the very beginning, the whole of the Bible, from Genesis through Revelation, but particularly from Exodus, where we see God stepping in and pulling his people out of Egypt, is going to be this tale of two kingdoms, and which kingdom wins? And which kingdom does God sit behind? And how do these two kingdoms interact? And we've always been talking about this all the way through these stories, all the way through the prophets. We kept on pointing out that there's these two things we looked at. And as we looked at the world around us, it would seem that the order of death is winning. Doesn't it? If we're honest. We kind of go like, oh gosh, and especially if you flip up any news channel, it don't matter which one you want. Whether you be, BBC or GNB or ITV or whatever. It's always about death. The greedy are the ones with all the power. Disasters cannot be thwarted. War cannot be stopped. Like yesterday, Putin's like, oh, we're going to call an Easter truce, and then woke up this morning and we find that, there's no truce. There's nothing. The Russian troops are still fighting and stuff, and they're blaming each other. And so ultimately, death wins. Death wins. And what is more finite than death? What is more real than the idea at the end of it all, you die? And in the beginning, we were invited to trust the story. At its core, the invitation of Genesis was the invitation to believe in the reality of the order of life. The great fall of humanity happened and happens because we choose to live in fear and doubt rather than in hope and freedom. And we begin to see the wind and waves and believe in the fact that the order of death doesn't get the last word. We're with Peter as he steps out of the boat and kind of goes like, oh, these wind and waves, never mind the fact that Jesus had stood in front of him. And we have the same story. We didn't get away from our core principles. This whole Jesus thing has been about taking the story and putting it in flesh. All throughout Tanakh, we are posed this question. Moses set before the people in Deuteronomy life and death. Joshua invited the Israelites to follow Adonai, and if not pick up and not pick up other gods from the order of death that they would choose to follow instead. The prophets pleaded with their brothers and sisters to repent and put their trust back in the order of life. Ezekiel was out and asked about hope and about death and about life, and he was shown a valley full of what? Does anybody remember? Dry bones. Absolutely, dry bones. And can anybody remember what question he was asked? Can these bones live? And the obvious answer is no. If I took you to a place and went, to a graveyard and dug up a grave that was, 500-600 years old and desecrated it and, whatever, and went, look, here's some bones. Can these bones live? You'd go, don't be daft. I'm calling the police for digging up graves. But Ezekiel was a man of hope. And he said, Sovereign Lord, only you know. What do we truly believe about life and death? What do we understand? That the resurrection changes everything. Do we understand that the resurrection changes everything? That on that fateful morning when the tomb was found barren and empty, God finally answered that question that he had allowed only Ezekiel to see in this vision. Apparently death isn't as real as we thought it was, and that changes everything. Paul does not say in the 15th chapter of his first letter to the Corinthians that without the crucifixion, their faith is in vain. He doesn't say that. What he says, as enamored as he is, and the other authors are with the cross and with the incarnation, but both wonderful truths, he did not give such an idea that place. Instead, Paul says the following in chapter 15. He says this, "But if it is preached that Christ has been raised from the dead, how can some of you say that there is no resurrection of the dead? If there is no resurrection of the dead, then not even Christ has been raised. And if Christ has not been raised, our preaching is useless, and so is your faith." If there is no resurrection, your faith is useless. Now, you can go to Israel, maybe in more peaceful times, but you can go to Israel, and you can go and visit famous tombs, and you can go look at them and stuff, and you can even go to one that claims to be the tomb, Joseph's tomb. Capital T, capital H, capital E. And there's one thing that's true about all these tombs that you can go and visit and go and look inside. What do you think it is? They're all empty. Absolutely. If you're going inside one, they're all empty. Resurrection is God's affirmation that the order of life really is the way that he sees it. That really he gets the last word. The way of generosity really is the best way to live. Forgiveness is worth paying the price, for love really does win. Resurrection is God's way of saying hope is worth it, and the story really can be trusted. And I choose to be a person of hope. He is not here. He is risen. Hallelujah. I love, I asked Rob to do some new graphics because we've had the old ones up for ages. And without even really talking about it, he put this little subtitle on our opening page that says, "Welcome to the family of hope," or a hope-filled family. Is that it? Hope-filled family. Absolutely. What is our hope? Basically, our hope is that Jesus rose from the dead, but we will one day, but death no longer holds power. So it's great. It's great. Anyway, let's have a bit of a look in some of these verses, shall we? Because I've gone on a bit. Jesus is risen from the dead. There is an earthquake. Verse 4, the guards were so afraid of him that they shook and became like dead men. The angels, and then, so who does the angel talk to? Verse 5. Mary, yeah. And he's telling them to go and tell the disciples that he's risen. He's telling the women to go and tell Mary, to go and tell the disciples that he is risen. And what does he say? Yeah. He says, go and tell my brothers to go to Galilee. There I will see him. Now, that's quite a journey. Especially back then. If you was to walk from Jerusalem to Galilee, you're not talking a couple of hours. You're talking 6-7 days walk. It's a good long week journey, all the way back up to Galilee. Let's keep reading. I know Andrew just read this, but let's keep reading. Let's remind ourselves. So while the women were on their way, some of the guards went into the city and reported to the chief priests everything that had happened. When the chief priests had met with the elders and devised a plan, they gave the soldiers a large sum of money, telling them, "You are to say his disciples came during the night and stole him away while we were asleep. If this report gets to the governor, we will satisfy him and keep you out of trouble." So the soldiers took the money and did as they were instructed, and the story has been widely circulated among the Jews to this very day. Then the 11 disciples went to Galilee, to the mountain where Jesus had told them to go. So, all right, so the disciples end up headed that way. They go and do what they've been told. And besides the fact that Jesus has to show up to repeat the angel's instructions is amazing. I find this to be a brilliant rabbinical move. While I've never been able to find any hints as to which mountain Jesus is referring to, the disciples seem to understand which one it was. And there's lots of debate, as you can imagine, in theology. You know, they kind of go, oh, is it Mount Arbi? Is it Gamla? Or maybe it's somewhere else. It's... Just to give you some idea, Mount Gamla is this little knoll back up there in Galilee. But Jesus does not instruct the woman to tell the disciples about a mountain. Nor given any directions, indications about which one to go to. He doesn't say, this mountain. He just says, go to the mountain. And I'd like to suggest that they went to Mount Hermon. That's what I think. That's my guess. You don't have to be persuaded by that in the slightest little bit. But I believe that that's the Mount of Transfiguration. And so, Peter, James, and John are going to go I know which mountain he's talking about. Come and follow us. Anyway, nevertheless, I think this is because the phrase that appears in both sets of instructions from Jesus, from the angel, there you will see him. It's the words that they put. And it seems to me that one of the most crucial moments of Jesus' ministry was the transfiguration, where Jesus is seen in all his glory. In Mark's gospel, the transfiguration is the linchpin of that entire gospel. When he's transfigured, he then turns to face Jerusalem, and and it's like, right, you've seen my glory, now you're going to understand what this is all about, and it leads to the cross, and it's the absolute linchpin. So he was seen, Jesus was seen in all his glory on that mountain. And of course, there is neither here nor there, no pun intended, but it almost doesn't matter if I'm correct or not. It's just what I like to think about. But I think there's a brilliant reason. It's a rabbinical reason, and it accomplishes two things. Number one, the disciples who were in Jerusalem, at least at some point of a resurrection, now have to travel all the way to the northernmost point of Jesus' ministry. Mount Hermon is in the modern-day Golan Heights. It's like right up north, right at the tip of Israel, pretty much in Syria, to be honest. And so they have to go all the way up north. And Jerusalem is, if you've never seen a map of Jerusalem, it's right down south. And it's Mount Hermon is just north of Caesarea Philippi. And that's where Mount Hermon's at. So they have to go all the way up there. And Caesarea Philippi is one of three sources of the Jordan River. And it would force the disciples to walk past almost literally every moment of Jesus' ministry as they went up there. They would have had opportunity to walk by and unpack all of Jesus' teaching post-resurrection. They'd have got to these points where in his ministry Jesus had told them stuff or shown them stuff or done stuff. And they'd have got, you could imagine the conversations that were happening. It's like, oh my gosh, we're here. This is where he healed such and such a person. This is where he told this parable. This is where he did such and such a thing. And then once they get up there and they have this moment, this commissioning, they're then told to go back to Jerusalem, to the Mount of Olives. So they've got another week's walk back down because the ascension happens at the Mount of Olives. And it's just this brilliant rabbinical move to drill home into them, to remind them, to continuously pull this kind of field trip learning together, so that they turn from being fearful to being people who, are in a room, but they're praying for God to come, waiting for the Holy Spirit. And it's brilliant as well that it goes up to Caesarea Philippi, because Caesarea Philippi is an incredibly significant place. And we haven't covered this teaching yet because we skipped ahead to Easter Sunday, but we will get there, and we'll get there fairly quickly as well. But it's important to unpack now. But there is a huge and defining moment in Jesus' ministry that happens at Caesarea Philippi. And if you've watched The Chosen, you probably know this. Because he rocks up and he changes one of his disciples' names at Caesarea Philippi. He changes Simon to Peter. But he says something significant. So he says, your name is Peter, and on this rock I will build this church. Wouldn't it make sense, as he wraps up his time on earth before his ascension, that he would utter the Great Commission in the same location where he said he would do this work? Where he says, go out and make disciples, go and transform the world, go and be my representatives, go, 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 go. And it's on this place, this rock on which I will build this church. You are the people, and I am sending you. Wouldn't it make sense to utter this command to make disciples of all nations? Wouldn't it, all nations at the same place where he marched his disciples to teach them about the nature and the character and the development of the kingdom of God and the way that it transforms it, and even to the very gates of hell, which we haven't unpacked. We will do. We haven't unpacked it yet. We will do. But at Caesarea Philippi, there was a temple that was called the gates of hell. So when he says, you are the rock on which I will build my church, and the gates of hell will not prevail against it, he's actually pointing to this horrible temple and this way of world. And you kind of go, it's these two empires at battle. And then there's the command that Jesus actually, and that, this is just a bit of a hunch really, that he does. He has this fun little field trip, and we just look right there, and then there's the command that Jesus actually does give his disciples. And so this is what it says. It says when they saw him, they worshipped him, but some doubted. Then Jesus came to them and said, all authority in heaven and on earth is given to me. They've just stopped there. I don't know if you picked it up, because I think too often we skim over it and we just land all doubt on Thomas, poor old Thomas, who asked a question and just basically went, I've not seen, and we go, oh, doubting Thomas. He must have doubted all the time. But actually, Jesus has stood in front of them saying, go and make disciples of all nations. All authority in heaven and earth is mine, and some doubted. It's more than one. And I love that we're told that. I love that we're told that even in the presence of the risen Jesus, some doubted. Before one of the grace and final commands Jesus gives in his earthly ministry, we're told that some doubted. And if you're writing the story, you don't put that people doubted. It's madness. And we skim over it. And we kind of go like, oh, they must have all been like really on fire because of course he stood there. But no, some doubted. The authors, Matthew's kind of like, yeah, Half of them were with him. Half of them were kind of like, oh, I'm not sure really what this means. And I just love that. And Jesus commissions them anyway. He doesn't single anybody out and goes like, oh, you're not doubting, you are, so I can't send you. He commissions all of them. Every single one. And he still does today. Every single one. This risen Jesus has way more faith in us than maybe we do in him. And that's amazing. Peter isn't even reinstated at this point, just to point out. This is pre-shores of Galilee. He's probably there, sort of hanging back, because the other disciples are like, you did what... it says the 11 disciples went to Galilee to a mountain. He does not separate the sheep from the goats at the Great Commission. He doesn't put the doubters in one pile and the believers in another. Apparently, doubt is acceptable for commissioned disciple makers of Jesus. I find that so encouraging, because there's so often we think we can't possibly talk about our faith because we don't have all the answers. And I've still got these big, challenging questions that I need to unpack myself. Do you know what? So are these. And they're stood there with him, listening to him, looking at him. Hope Family Church is all about this, about inviting people into the journey, into the way, into figuring this stuff out, into inviting people about being honest that sometimes we don't have all the answers. But we trust that the story is good. We trust that our Father is good. And that's good news, because it means that actually if we're wrestling with stuff, we still get to talk about our faith and what God's doing in us. So here's the clincher, though. Jesus tells them, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given me. Therefore, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you. And surely I will be with you to the very end of the age. Let's unpack this, but let's do it a little bit. Let's do it backwards. Let's talk about teach them. So he had three things. He said, teach them, baptize them, and make disciples. And he actually said it in the other order, but we're going to unpack it backwards. He said, make disciples, baptize, teach. So it says, teach them. Jesus wants his followers to be teachers. One of our jobs is to open our eyes and assist others in opening their eyes to the truth and reality of what God's story is doing all around them. Of pointing stuff out, of going, this is what God is doing in your life, in our community, in our world. And it may look like death is winning, but believe me, it doesn't have the last word. It's being defeated. Can't run anywhere. It's got no feet. We are to bring them to some holy place where they can see God. That could be here, it can be at the bus stop, it can be anywhere. Like he didn't say, hey, you've got to get everybody and bring them to Mount Hermon where they can see me and I'm just going to hang out here. No, you see me now. Go and help others see me everywhere. We are to teach others about God as seen in the person of Jesus. We are to pass on his teachings and say there is a better way to life. It's not constrictive. It's freedom giving. And so if we're going to teach them, we've got to get the text inside of us. And I find this so challenging because I don't have the text inside of me as much as what I should do. We're inviting people to return home. We're inviting them to come back to God, or to be in the form that they originally created to be in. And we are to bring people the good news about a far better kingdom. And there's a new king and a new kingdom, and it's instituted, and it's a day like today where resurrection reigns. And it's a washing and a cleansing, and it's putting the new self on, all that stuff. And it's amazing and brilliant and beautiful. And the best, honestly, it is. It's the best news that we can possibly pass on to people, isn't it? We're setting them free. We're teaching them. We're baptizing them. We're making them disciples. So we make them disciples. It's a big passion of mine. It's we've got to live it out. We've got to find ways of encouraging one another. I think at times as well, this is a portion that kind of gets me into the biggest trouble, because I think sometimes we think discipleship is about just going to a life group or coming to church, take communion, all that sort of stuff, and it's not. I don't believe the commission is inviting us into this, and I don't believe it's actually inviting us to make converts either. It's about making disciples. It's one of my biggest struggles when we just think it's about getting people through the door. It's not. The way that we change this world, the way that this world is changed, is through the making of disciples. I love the idea of making converts, by the way. Like, people have got to be converted. We've got to have this moment where they see Jesus for who they are. I just don't think that the Great Commission is saying that's the answer. The Great Commission is all about a call to spiritual growth or maturity, about making disciples, apprentices, as those who did the Practicing the Way course. The name of the course went out of my head. Not much of a John Mark Comer apprentice, am I? Thankfully, that's not what he's trying to do. I need to hear this command through the ears of the context that it's in. The call to make disciples is a call to rabbinical, come follow me ship. I've used this analogy before. It's like we're ducklings following a duck, a mother duck. We just need to be one. If you watch them, they tend to walk in single file, don't they? I'm not the duck. Jesus is the duck in this analogy. Don't push it too far. But he's the one we're following. My hope is that I've got people who are following me. A bit like Paul saying, you want to know how to follow Jesus, look, and you don't know, look at me. That's Paul not bragging. That's just Paul saying, like, I'm a disciple trying to work this out. If you want to try and work it out, follow my example. That's got to be all of our hope. You want to work this out. You want to know what it's like, what prayer's like. It's not hard. It's a conversation, and this is how you do it. You want to know what fasting's like. It's not hard. It's just this. And it's being honest with what we're doing. This is the call to discipleship. And small groups do play a part in that. Micro groups play a part in that. But it's about relationship, isn't it, really? It's about diving deep with each other, journeying along with people and saying, let's work this out together. Follow me as I follow him. And the best part of this whole thing is that Jesus doesn't do the normal rabbi thing. Typically, rabbis would pass on their authority to at least one or some of their disciples so that the story may continue. Now we're listening to the resurrected Jesus talk here, and he's very much alive, and he keeps all the authority. He says, all authority is mine, therefore go. A typical rabbi would say, you've learned enough. You now have authority. Go. Jesus doesn't do that. He says, all authority is mine. All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. To who? To Jesus. He ain't giving it away. We're sharing it. We are to go and make disciples. We are to make disciples the way that Jesus made disciples. We are commissioned in the living authority of Jesus, living authority. And when the going gets tough and mistakes happen and fear is overwhelming, what's the very last line? Someone read it to me. What's the very last line? I will be with you always, to the very end of the age. Has the age ended? No. How do we know that? Yeah, because we're here. Absolutely, because Jesus ain't come back yet. But he's here. He's here by his Spirit. He's here in us. And we get to bring this transformation. God, they're good closing words for today and forever until he comes back. Because there's loads of things to think about and to ponder. It's great to think about and to ponder which lens you view, Jesus' story through, whether it's incarnation, crucifixion, or resurrection. Just because I pick the resurrection and fall in love with that, that's why I get so excited about this. Like Christmas, I get excited about Christmas. So it makes me sound like a Scrooge if I'm not excited about Christmas, doesn't it? But this is, and the incarnation is a day that changed the world. But death being beaten, sin being destroyed. That one gasp as the song that we sang, that one miraculous breath, that ruach of God changes everything. Paul will tell us later that the same Spirit that raised Jesus from the dead lives inside of us. The same Spirit that raised Jesus from the dead lives inside of us. And we get to walk this out as people of the resurrection, as people of hope who wrestle with doubts and questions. And do you know what? That's okay. But you are commissioned to do that wrestling with people and with, and even in front of people who don't know, to kind of go like, when they say like, well, if God's so big and mighty then, so why is all these wars? Or why do children die? And blah, blah, all the objections that you come up with, and you kind of go, well, I don't have an answer to that. You kind of go, and it's not well, we just get to shrug and go like, yeah, we don't know either. But it's it's kind of going like, do you know what? There are big questions that we need to wrestle with as a society. And if we walk this path and follow these teachings and see the way that Jesus sees the world and sees each other, then this stuff that you have an objection to stops. Because he reigns. We get to create space for the big things and choose people to journey with. Jesus is alive. He's alive. And he sent you and me to be his messengers, to see this world transformed. You are the hope for this world. That's not saying that you have to die for this world. Jesus has done that. But how are they to know if we don't go tell them? Fairly sure Paul says that. Wish I'd written down the reference. But how are they to know if we don't go tell them? If they don't see our lives, if we keep it hidden? Fairly sure Jesus said something like that as well. You are the light of the world, a city on a hill that cannot be hidden. That's us collectively as a community, but it's you individually as well. You are a city. Your light is meant to shine before all men. What light? The light inside of you. Jesus, the light of the world. That's only possible because he rose from the dead. That he's alive. He's alive, folks. We get this. It's amazing and it's transforming. This is why I get most excited about today.